get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
And welcome aboard, Kneecaps Nation. We are clear for takeoff on this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar, that's me. Happy to be joined, as always, by Phil Byrne, taking a last-second drink of the coffee or the go-go juice or whatever
Water.
It is to get you through the most current episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast.
Yeah, no. Hey, you know what? Spring seasonal allergies for me are right around the corner. It can never be so quick to make sure I'm still hydrated to do a podcast. So,
Absolutely.
Taking the proper precautions, I suppose.
Exactly. And you didn't have to come forward with that. There's a don't ask, don't tell policy with what's in our thermoses or our mugs during our Kneecaps for Breakfast recordings. So it could have been anything. It's okay. But water it is to keep everything in good shape for a eventful episode. So, Phil, as we talked about on our last episode, we had a big meeting on the week ahead, and that was with all the NFL executives and coaches and whatnot. And it's kind of cool to see how they all gather for their annual picture, and they're all kind of dressed in their street clothes and whatnot. You kind of, it's almost out of context because you're not seeing them in the team issued attire and the hats or the visors and the headsets and all that. You kind of see them more as just regular guys like you and I. So that all took place this past week down in Florida, and we talked about how there was going to be news of rules and different changes and proposals that were brought to the forefront, and a lot happened over the past week, which is kind of what we wanted. We didn't want just a boring ho-hum meeting. So I guess we can just kind of dive right into it. And one of the bigger rule changes that is going to take effect for this year that I'm not sure anybody really asked for, but it's going to impact all 32 teams, is how first downs are going to be awarded. So those close first downs that they would usually run the chain gang out for, they're going to implement the Hawkeye technology to basically use cameras and graphics and all that, kind of like what they use in tennis matches with the ball out of bounds line. And chain gang is going to be a thing of the past starting this year for awarding first downs. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that'll only be a term used to talk about prisons, I guess, quite frankly. I think it's important for the NFL, with all the money that it has, to stay on the cutting edge of the tech of the sport, so long as it doesn't disrupt the playing experience for the players, the viewing experience for the fans, and just the overall flow of the game. I don't know if this will, but I'll tell you what, it's going to be strange that first time a team, is close to getting a first down, and instead of having, a jolly crew go out and trot out of the field, and it's taken an extra 10, 15 seconds. And then you probably, in some of these TV games, will go ahead and have, this is a quick reminder from Progressive, or some sort of in-game sponsor while they take an extra 10, 15 seconds. They're not going to do it. They're going to have this technology where I would assume it's pretty instantaneous, so maybe that'll help with the game flow a little bit too. I guess my thing with this is from a challenging and officiating standpoint, how is this going to impact what we see? I think that's kind of the one thing that it sounds great on paper. We haven't seen it really, as far as I know, in these games. I'm a little shocked they didn't get more testing with it through preseason before essentially giving it the green light, but here we are.
Yeah, for sure. There was also quite a bit of discussion beyond that. No firm resolution has taken shape just yet, but the fact that it's looking more and more like a 18-game regular season is on the horizon. And I think anybody with a brain could have had the assumption that we were going to that point. Do you think this is something the league is ready for, Phil? or do you think a lot of rules need to be tweaked or policies need to be implemented in order for there to be a more seamless transition towards an 18 game schedule? Because that was one of the big takeaways from this past week's meetings was the fact that such a move almost seems inevitable.
I think they're going to be fine with going to the 18. I would assume this is going to be of the idea that you trim the preseason down to 2 games instead of 3. And then basically you just backload that extra game into the regular season. Um, Obviously, there are players that will get hurt in these extra games. There are players that will have more contract incentives that they can hit in these games. So you kind of have the pro and the cons from the player side there. It's only going to make the TV contracts more expensive because, as you saw this year with us and the Vikings, when you get these really tight races down the stretch, these games are absolutely captivating to see how this is going to play out. So it kind of makes sense in that regard. Um, quite honestly, like I think at some point we are going to get some more expansion teams in the NFL too. I don't know how they're going to do it. Maybe it would be a simple, have 5 team divisions or something like that. And we're adding a couple teams, but um, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're looking at a larger league playing more games. I think you're going to get some international teams too, and expand the North American footprint a little bit. So that being said, I think the owners, as they get a little bit younger, with some of the new blood coming in, I think they want to shake things up a little bit and still make their money at the end of the day.
So let's kind of bring the reins back in a little bit and speak on the things that the Lions brought to the table. And we mentioned the 3 proposals that Lions Brass was going to take down to Florida for proposal and a vote on. And they had mixed results on that, you could say. One of the bigger ones that they had brought to the table was the playoff seedings to be handled by record as opposed to division champions getting the priority and then seeding the wild cards starting at fifth, regardless of what
Yeah.
the record is, and then going down from there. So that didn't have a decision made either way on it. They decided to table that discussion for down the road. They have another set of meetings coming up later on in the spring towards summertime, and that's usually if there's like a split right down the middle or if it's really close and they don't feel like putting it to a vote just yet, they'll kind of table it for discussion down the
Yeah.
road. So that's what they did with that. No decision to be made at that point. Where did the Lions' proposals come up empty? There were 2 of those. So none of their proposals got straight up accepted. So they lost out on the automatic first down for the illegal contact or the holding 5 yards and an automatic first down. They lost out on that one. And then they also lost out on the preseason injured reserve players to not count against the regular season roster limit of 90 active and reserve players. So didn't work out in their favor as far as those went. Any surprises with any of those getting either shot down or tabled, Phil?
I am disappointed about the illegal contact not resulting in the first down. I think especially when you look at the aggressiveness that the Lions play with on defense under Aaron Glenn, and I'm sure it's going to continue under um,
Kelvin Shepard.
Calvin Shepard. Uh, it just seems like it was something that would benefit us in the short term. I think a lot of teams, especially the products from a defensive standpoint, would also, benefit from it. But it's not really how the league is thinking, these days. So it is an offensive league, not super shocking, but it's one of those things that I'd love to see it come back in a couple of years, and kind of revisit it. Maybe we'll see. Um, the reseeding, that's an interesting one. Um, again, I can see the merit in some of it, and again, how that would impact the Lions potentially having a very tough division here. But um, I yeah, it just seems like there weren't enough teams on board or enough people that think that it should change from its current format essentially.
It makes you wonder, though, if they have plans to maybe revise it a little bit. Like, I'd be okay with a variation of that. Like, if you say, okay, we eliminate the automatic first down stipulation, but instead of it being a 5 yard penalty, that it is, make it a 10 yard penalty. Because let's be honest,
Hmm.
more often than not, you've got a team that is 10 yards or less away from getting a first down. It's only going to affect those longer than 10 yard plays where that wouldn't necessarily result in the first down. So maybe give a little and take a little. And if you say, hey, this is what we propose, maybe you have a better chance of it getting accepted down the road. Because like we talked about last week, Phil, a 5 yard penalty for a illegal contact, which half the time is a judgment call anyway, or a bang bang call that really can't be reviewed. That's
Yeah.
a killer for a team that has otherwise been holding their water on a defensive possession, and then all of a sudden it's an automatic first down, even though it's only a 5 yard penalty, and then you go on from there. So I think it would benefit a lot more teams than just the Lions, but nonetheless, that has been shot down. What are some of the rules that have passed? So there's been a lot of talk going back to last year, Phil, about the kickoff. And a lot of people liked it. A lot of people didn't care for it. Some people didn't have an opinion either way. Either way, it looks like that kickoff format is here to stay. However,
Yeah.
they have tweaked the touchback rules a little bit because we still saw a lot of teams that just booted it out the back of the end zone every time and accepted the touchback, which they moved from the 25 out to the 30. So now the league is going to take it a step further and move that touchback point from the 30 to the 35 as yet another reason to try and deter teams from just booting it and calling it a day. Phil, are we starting to lose a little bit of cabin pressure with this whole kickoff thing? At what point do you eliminate the kickoff altogether? Because putting teams at the 35-yard line with a touchback, you're only asking them to go 20,
Two
25
first
yards
downs.
before you're in a field goal range.
Yeah, yeah, and especially with some of the kickers in the league now, you playing indoors with not any added, you know, outside elements. Yeah, it really only takes 20, 25 yards to get a first down and get in field goal range. I understand in theory by like, oh, hey, well, now this is going to have people that want to return some of these, but I still think it's like a case of, you know, do you really want to return it? Potentially have something go wrong and get tackled at your own 15, or only get up to the 15, um, or just take it at the 35. So I don't know. Like, you're going to run some kickers that I'm sure are going to try to almost pin it deep, but then you risk, the flag for it going out of bounds. So um, I don't know. The kickoff in the NFL is something that it felt awfully strange last year, and if this isn't going to make it seem even stranger, um, I can't say I'm really a fan of this per se. But again, this is a league that is going to try to have these offenses get into field goal range to make some of these games more entertaining, I guess, if it's a close game towards the end. So
AKA higher scoring.
exactly. So stay tuned on that, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. One variation of the kickoff has been tabled for future discussion, and that was the onside kick stipulation. You have to be in the fourth quarter and trailing and have to disclose to the other team that your intention is to kick an onside kick. So there's been some discussion about maybe tweaking the onside kick policy a little bit. That has been tabled for future discussion. A big rule that has been generating a lot of attention did pass, and that was the overtime rule. So now every team will be guaranteed a second possession after their first. So let's say the team that wins the coin toss gets the ball, marches down the field, and scores. It's kind of like the Lions did against the Rams opening week of last season. In that situation, instead of the game being over and everyone wearing Honolulu blue goes home happy, Now the Rams get the ball. Now, I understand that generated a lot of support, especially because what we saw in the playoffs when Buffalo wasn't able to possess the ball after Kansas City marched 75 yards down the field and marched on to a Super Bowl from that point.
Right.
What I'm curious about, Phil, is they're not changing the length of overtime, 10 minutes. So what are we really accomplishing here? Because the point of overtime is to break ties. So all
Yeah.
you're really doing is potentially giving the second team the ability to match instead of one up. I'm a little confused as to why they made it
Well,
to where overtime itself isn't any longer. They're just adding another opportunity. We want to break ties, don't we?
and to me, this seems like we're gonna have more tie games now.
Yeah, which nobody wants.
No, right?
That's why they got rid of them in hockey.
This isn't the English Premier League, you
Yeah.
know? Like no one wants to have a draw or a tie. So, um, I can't say I'm a fan of this one. I get how you could be a little salty, you know, if you don't get the proper possessions, but some of it comes down to your defense has to get a stop, or
And
you
there's a
should
lot
not
of
win the game.
value in that. That's
You
half
know?
of the
Yeah,
situation. What you do on
yeah,
offense and what you do on defense. I don't
yeah,
care if you have the ability to go and march 75 yards down the field. If you can't stop anybody, chances are you don't deserve to win in the first place.
yeah, yeah. So I'm really not a fan of this one, and I think
No.
it's going to result in more ties. Like I could see this being one where they implement, and then by this time next year they're like, yeah, that didn't work.
Yeah, yeah. And
You
it
know?
is worth noting that the original proposal was to expand overtime to 15 minutes, which I think would allow enough time for there to be a
Yeah,
third
minimum full
possession.
quarter.
So
Yeah,
maybe that tie breaking possession to take place. I just don't know if there's enough time for there to be three possessions in 10 minutes. That just seems
mm,
like a lot to ask. So the original proposal was for 15. The NFL counteroffered and said, no, we'll make it 10 minutes. We'll keep it at 10, but we'll accept the rule for the second possession. So that's how that's going to go in the books. Another rule that has been enacted for this year is the expansion of replay assist on 15-yard penalties over the course of a game. So that would include pass interference or some personal fouls, some situations where, again, you're talking a lot of judgment calls, a lot of bang bang stuff that's happening heat of the moment that you used to not be able to do anything about. Once the flag was thrown and the penalty was announced, then you mark the ball and you play on. Seems
mm,
like a good thing, Phil. Anytime you're able to get a second set of eyes on something, the idea is to get it right. And I feel like
yeah,
this is a step in that direction.
yeah, without a doubt. You know, I think you kind of just spoke on it right there. That anytime you get a second set of eyes on it, you know, think about how many calls could have been overturned, or you know, the TV crew seemingly is like almost like yelling, like, "Oh no, this is wrong." A rules person is saying it's wrong, and yet you know the officiating crew, you know, called it the other way. So again, yeah, I'm with you on this one. I think that is a good thing.
Do you think that, taking a step further, they should do what they do in the college game, how every play is reviewed and eventually getting to a point where every penalty is reviewed? Or do you think that is going to have an adverse effect on game flow and game speed?
Yeah, I mean, I think the college game, and especially with the first downs and the additional time that's added when teams get first downs, it can be a very long game. So I think the NFL still needs to realize that you know it is a very TV friendly product, and it you know again I think they should just try to keep it that way.
And the probably the one that generated the most amount of attention this past week was the tush push or
Yeah,
the brotherly shove. And we all know that it was the Green Bay Packers now that was the sponsors of this bill to go to the Senate floor, if you will. And that discussion has been tabled for future discussion. And it sounds to me, based on what I've heard, that it was a complete deadlock tie. You had 16 teams in favor of keeping it and 16 teams in favor of getting rid of it once and for all and making it illegal. So we're no closer to a decision on the tush push now as we were a week ago. But hey,
Yeah,
it could be discussed down the road here pretty soon.
yeah, and it sounded like Dan Campbell was in favor of um, the tush push being legal and not illegal and not being banned. So, um, he was kind of erring on the side of like, well, you got to stop it, So, and that does kind of speak into how he sees football. Um, but yeah, interesting there between the Packers and the Eagles, and it sounded like things did get heated a little bit there, in Florida regarding that vote. So you read between the tea leaves a little bit.
Absolutely. So that gives you an idea of what went down at the meetings from a rules and from a competition standpoint as well.
Yeah.
So we'll keep an eye on some of those other moves as more meetings take place this offseason. You're listening to this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar, Phil Byrne, happy you are along for the ride with us. Phil, it wasn't all just votes and discussions on rules and things from a gaming standpoint. There was also a lot of interviews that took place among the movers and shakers and executives within the league. And I think what a lot of people were on pins and needles for was what some of the comments from Lions brass would have wound up being. And of course, Brad Holmes took some time to speak with the media about how he thought the offseason has gone so far. And he seemed pretty ecstatic and seemed from a free agency standpoint that he accomplished more than what he himself anticipated going into this a couple of months back. Do you agree with his assessment that everything up to this point from the guys they've signed and made offers to has gone according to plan in your eyes?
I mean, basically, his comments were alluding to some of the best free agents that they signed were the guys that were on the roster, and they were the moves that people have already had extensions to. Now, yes, totally agree in the sentiment that if those guys were hitting the open market, without a doubt, a guy like Aleem McNeil, I'm trying to think of who else would have been up for this one, but you know what I mean? Like there would have been some guys who would have been just about eligible to sign tender sheets or something like that. So I got to disagree with Brad here. I think he's amazing at building a team. I think he's done an awesome job drafting for us. And I realize he does want to keep the core, the 85 to 90% of this team of its core intact. But realistically, like, are we talking Roy Lopez being a splashy signing on the defensive line? DJ Reed? I mean, I think that's kind of well, you lost. No, why am I blanking
Carlton
on his name?
Davis.
Yeah, we're in this weird spot where we haven't seen football in
Yeah,
4
exactly.
months. Carlton Davis for DJ Reed. I mean, I don't know if one is better than the other. So did we really get an improvement or an upgrade there? Not really. You know. Um. So yeah, I'm going to disagree here. Like I think he does a great job, but I don't think we were overly aggressive at all in free agency.
And what you and I do, Phil, is at the end of the day, it's just two buddies talking about football. I'm not here
Yeah.
looking for word for word quote, and I'm not reading off my iPad and doing things, straight off the. No, a lot of what we do is just talking off cuff. So forgive me if I'm a
Yeah.
little off on the exact verbiage that was used, but Brad, in a sense, doubled down on his way, and he said, "I acknowledge that all you Lions fans out there aren't going to be too happy about this, but we're going to do it the way that we've been doing it, the draft, develop, and extend format. We're not going to upset the apple cart by bringing in people from the outside. We're not going to make big, bold moves by making the splashy signings or what have you. And we believe that we have what it takes to win a Super Bowl right there in that locker room. And we didn't win a Super Bowl the last 2 years because hashtag things and bad luck. And if you're looking for us to make that big move, that splashy signing, it's not going to happen because we got bills coming up. And think of it as like the kid that wants to go on this vacation and your dad has to pop the bubble and say, son, we can't take that vacation this year because, we got to pay the mortgage and we got bills that are due and all this. That's essentially what Brad's message was from this past week. So if you're looking for us to do something bold or that's going to require a little bit of money, it's not going to happen because we're worried about re-signing guys in 26, 27, and 28. Phil, make it make
So,
sense for me because a lot of what he said did not send the message that he and the franchise are doing everything they can to win a Super Bowl. Because at the end of the day, I thought this was what it's all about, right?
okay, so the draft is a couple weeks away. We don't know what the Lions are going to do. As of this taping, who is starting opposite Aiden Hutchinson? We have been talking about this since literally
The
the
dead body
Super
of
Bowl.
Marcus Davenport.
Okay, like, is he even going to make the team?
Yeah.
But the issue is, who is it? You know, it's great to think in hypotheticals, but the life of me, I don't think we signed anyone that you're like, oh, that's a surefire starter on the other defensive end spot. The front that we play, like, I guess Levi Onwuzurike can kind of play a little bit of defensive end, but like, let's not kid ourselves. He's a defensive tackle. That's not his spot.
And the
Um,
only reason he did a year ago is because he had to. They needed healthy
yeah.
bodies. And for more often than not, he was a healthy enough body to plug a hole in a capsizing boat. But this can't be the plan moving forward, right?
Listen, it is the most talented defensive end position still drafts, in the last decade. I get that, but you're also picking a pick 28, and who's to say there's not a run and then you have to trade up and then all of a sudden, there's a lot of crazy variables that when you don't take care of business in free agency or make a trade or show any sort of improvement in a very, very pivotal spot on your team, it just, it blends to a lot of questions. John Kaminsky, he just retired. So, I mean, if fans were pinning that, oh, maybe he can be the other guy if he comes back, help. No, he's done. He
Mm-hmm.
retired. He's he's,
Mm-hmm.
he's out. So we need some help there. I'm not seeing who we have that's stepping in. Um, I want to give the guy the benefit of the doubt because I mean he's done a tremendous job, but that's been a glaring hole for so long now, and it hasn't been addressed.
And there's no clear cut plan as to how they are going to address it. And
Yeah,
like you pointed out, Phil, yeah, it's a deep draft for that position this year. But as you said, they're picking 28, which is essentially a second round pick. So
yeah.
you're running the risk of not getting first round talent at the position. And assuming that you are drafting a guy that's not all the way there, I've said this for months and months. You are in your window to win this thing right now. What you don't have on your side is time to be able to develop guys the way you did at the very beginning of this regime. It's just not it's not logical.
No.
So here's the other side of the coin. You've got, let's go back to Troy Hendrickson watch here. You have the president or whatever she is of the Bengals that came out and just made a fool of herself in a few different areas, from saying that we could be seeing the Bengals in Columbus a year from now to basically saying, well, we gave Trey Hendrickson a decent enough offer, and if he doesn't like it, that's his business. Okay, that's nothing that I would want to say to the defending NFL sack leader, but okay. And their contrast to that is you see Trey Hendrickson with an interview with, I can't remember who it was with, and they said, "Hey, what website do you fancy the most these days?" Without even pausing for a breath of air, he deadpans Zillow. So, I mean, if that's not airline workers waving the neon batons up in the air guiding the plane in, if that's not a clear and obvious sign that, hey, Trey Hendrickson is open for business immediately,
I
I don't know how
mean,
you can be more blunt and obvious about it.
maybe he's just going to retire and become a real estate agent.
Could
He's
happen.
partnered with Zillow.
Could happen. Maybe John Kaminsky can join him, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hear he's going to be looking for a source of income pretty soon. So
Um,
it just goes
yeah.
back to my point, Phil, that it's clear and obvious to me that they are not doing everything they can to position this team to win a Super Bowl right now. And maybe this is a rhetorical question, Phil, and you don't have the answer to it. I mean, none of us do, let's be honest. But my question to that is why? Why sell to your fan base that we're going 85% of the way and we're just going to blow off the other 15% because, reasons?
The only thing that I can think why we haven't done any of this, and this has been such the glaring need for so long, is they saw what Garrett got paid in Cleveland, and they're absolutely scared to death. No, first of all, they want Hutch to be healthy. They want him to contribute about what he potentially could ask in his next deal, that they have just no clue how they're going to afford it. But we can't be in this paralyzed state where we feel like we're close. But to be close, you have to do more. Like I feel like we're that dog that's just chasing the mail carrier, saying the same thing, but who's starting on the other side of Hutch? We just have been for so long, like we're taking crazy pills here or something, but like I just don't know how many more times we can say it. It seems like we needed to do something for a very long time. And again, if the Cincinnati Bengals want to go move to Columbus and become the Columbus Clowns, and they want to offset some salary in the process, we'll gladly take Trey Hendrickson for a 5th-round pick or something like that, or whatever day 3 pick we
I
have.
mean, it
But
seems to me that the acquisition cost of Trey Hendrickson is going to be very easy to stomach. I think what Brad is most concerned about is the fact that he's going to
yeah,
require an extension on the back end. But what the uncomfortable conversation needs to be is, Brad, there's ways to work around it. There's this thing called the franchise tag, which I know you hate to use. It's there for a reason. Brad, you have things like, I don't know, 5th-year options on a lot of these early round draft picks. Use them. Nobody says that you need to re-sign guys at the very earliest opportunity. There's ways that you can avoid paying Jared Goff $70 million at the tail end. You can restructure contracts. You can rework deals. It happens all over the league. I got
yeah,
news for you. The salary cap is going to go up next year. It's going to go up the following year. There's a very good chance that whatever you sign a guy like Trey Hendrickson for is going to be nullified by different maneuvers you can make on your roster and how you're paying guys or when you're extending guys and what the salary cap goes up to. But this whole being scared about what are we going to do in 2027 and 2028 when we could be out of our window by then. Windows in the
yeah.
NFL, Phil, don't stay as wide open as you think.
Nope. And they're made of glass and they shatter easily.
Mm-hmm.
So, go to Wallside or something. I don't know. I don't know what the plug is there, but
1-800-521-7800, Wallside Windows.
yeah. Trust them, they are the factory.
You got it.
All right. Now pay us. But okay. Anyways,
Yeah,
that's
shameless
neither here
plug,
nor
Wallside. Yeah.
there. That's neither here nor there. But
Yeah.
I just think like we haven't done enough. I feel like there is a roster paralysis that has gone into effect with the salaries here. I think you spoke through a couple of the different options. I think the crazy thing we're starting to get in that season where I'm looking at 3 mock drafts each and every year. The Lions need interior offensive line help too. And there could be a situation where we are looking at everything that we have been saying. Oh, hey, there's this guy, that's going to be available. He's dropping. He's supposed to be a top 15 pick as an edge rusher. Who's not to say that we just don't get an interior offensive lineman at pick 28? I
Mhm.
mean, I've seen crazier things happen. This team clearly has an offensive focus with how they want to build. So I'm just saying, prepare yourself, Lions fans. And if you think, oh my gosh, we got James Pierce, staring us right in the face, he's going to be this explosive edge guy. And then we end up taking Booker from Alabama, the guard, at pick 28 or
Flashbacks
something
of
like
Jalen
that.
Carter all over again.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And
just prep yourself.
last point before we call it a day, Phil, you basically got confirmation that Aleem McNeil not going to be ready in time for the season. We all kind of assumed that. The big guy off an ACL that late in the year in December, we kind of figured that he wouldn't be ready to go. Looking like Hutch should be good to go by the time
Yeah.
September gets here, so that's good news. But again, the topic of the whole back end of this episode is what are they going to do about the other side? So we'll keep tabs on it because it looks like the whole Bengals and Trey Hendrickson stalemate is not going to be resolved, at least in the greater Cook County area, anytime real soon. So I guess we'll continue to be on Trey Hendrickson watch till next time, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. The Hendrickson hour, we'll just say, where's he doing? What's he up to? But hey, if they were able to get it, he would be an awesome compliment to Hutch, and I think a lot of Lions fans would really like that. But we'll see. We
Hutch
will
in his
see.
prime, Hendrickson in his prime. It can be the H brothers. You can package it up like you do with Sonic and Knuckles. Let's find a way to have some fun with it. But hey, Brad wants to pinch pennies, so we'll pick it up again another day. So that's going to be all she wrote on this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast as we broke down the NFL 2025 Spring League meetings. Phil and I are going to get back into draft conversation on our next episode, so be sure to join us for that. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning, go Lions, 4 down the field, over and out.